Well, still on the electricity crisis, President Ramaphosa has admitted that government's failure in 1998 to allocate funding to Eskom to build new power stations is one of the causes of the rolling blackouts South Africa is experiencing now. Ramaphosa has been addressing the party's KZN Provincial Executive Committee meeting in Pietermaritzburg. He also says lack of funding to repair aging electricity infrastructure is to blame. Now, let's discuss this. We're now joined via Zoom by energy analyst Professor Hartmut Winkler. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, one of the things that President Cyril Ramaphosa is saying, he's asked, the Eskom board to consider postponing the 18.65% electricity tariff increase by NERSA, that was granted last week. Just your thoughts on that, and what would it mean for Eskom's operations and financial woes?
Yes, well, right now, Eskom doesn't have enough funds to do what they want to do. The repairs that they're engaging with and the maintenance work costs a lot of money. These power stations break down far often than they should. And so it just, normally you would actually consider closing something like that, just like with a car. If it's just breaks down too often, you'll just simply say, well, it's time to get a new one. In this case, you can't really do that. So ultimately, they're forced to try and go on with this. And even though I'm sure Eskom can still save money in a lot of places, right now they are in a situation, and that's what NERSA looked at. They looked at, well, how much money do they need to operate? And they came to this 18.65 figure. So if they're not going to get this from from tariff increases, then the question is where they're going to get it from. Are they going to ask government again? They probably will have to. The alternative is just simply what we are, in a sense, seeing now, that Eskom isn't able to burn some of its gas reserves that it normally has, because it simply doesn't have the money to buy the diesel which is necessary to run those. So it's not easy. The money has got to come from somewhere. If it doesn't come from the actual consumers, then it's got to come from the state, essentially.
Another thing, Eskom, denying reports that, South Africans should contend with a possible permanent load shedding, planned for the next 2 years. But of course, we, added that the recovery of its own coal fleet will not be accomplished in the near future. Just your thoughts on how sustained blackouts can help, the energy crisis that we're currently experiencing.
Yes, we'll put it that way. The reason certain levels of load shedding are agreed on any particular time depends on how much you actually have available in terms of electricity generation capacity. So if something breaks down very suddenly, then you're forced to go to a higher stage of load shedding. And unfortunately, you can never really predict when that's going to happen. So when Eskom makes an announcement like that, it shouldn't be interpreted as saying that, okay, we're going to have stage 2 and 3 non-stop for the next 12 months or so. That's almost impossible to do. There would be times when they would be forced to go to stage 6 or even stage 8. There are times when they might feel that, well, actually right now we have enough power, so let's just maybe drop load shedding altogether for a couple of days. But I think what they're looking at is, what is the current trend? How much do we have available now? Is that in any way going to change? And in order for it to change meaningfully, we need extra power stations, which are just simply not going to come online in the next while. There have been talks of minor gains in generating capacity through various mechanisms, but those ultimately don't really amount to very much. There is unfortunately no short-term solution to getting a lot of more extra power online. So that means that we are going to be in the situation we are now for quite a while still. In fact, I predict that it's going to get worse now before it gets better. If you interview me this time next year and we are at exactly the same level where we are now, then I think we would have done fairly well. The danger is that we are then off even worse. So stage 2 and 3 on average would actually be a reasonably good achievement for the next 12 months, as much as this is certainly not what people would want to hear. But unfortunately, that to me seems to be the likely scenario.
You talk of, not seeing somehow a short-term to actually medium-term plan on the cards at the moment. Let's just look at what, President Cyril Ramaphosa said in his weekly letter. In fact, he made several mentions of possible solutions on the cards, saying that they've identified 6 power stations over the next few months to recover additional capacity. Also saying things like efforts are in place to restore, units that are out in Medupi, Kusile and Kuburg. They've imported 300 megawatts of capacity from a neighboring country, an additional 1,000 megawatt also in the pipeline. These are but short-term solutions. Where are they going to get us?
Yes, not very far, unfortunately. Like, for example, you mentioned 300 megawatts from other countries. Even if that was to come, that's even less than half a stage of load shedding. So that's not ultimately going to make much of a difference. And I'm a bit puzzled about where all this stuff from neighboring countries is going to come from, because those countries themselves built the extra capacity because they need it. A lot of the relief will probably come in the form of private power stations, usually solar power stations, which a lot of the major companies like mines, for example, are at this stage planning. But to build a solar power station takes approximately 18 months. And before that, you still need to get an approval process, which quite a few of them have gotten now. But in order to actually feel that impact, which probably in the end, what they've announced, if that's actually what they're going to get, then yes, that will mean about 3 stages of load shedding. But that we're only going to feel in about 2 years' time, not before that.
And, a lot of the times when South Africans are looking for solutions, they told that, the more households, businesses, or even towns, if I can use the town of Orania as an example, the more those that happen, and getting off that grid, it's better for Eskom. We're also hearing now that, every forum announcing that it's starting its own power company, saying that, its long-term plan is to develop the first modular pebble bed reactor in the country. I'd like to know your thoughts around just some of these solutions that are being pegged around.
Yes, well, when you talk about the municipal solutions, those are part of the 9,000 megawatts that the president was talking about. So it's not only companies, it's also municipalities that have made some sort of plans to at least draw some of the power from somewhere else. And yes, and if a big company ends up using less electricity from Eskom because they have a solar plant on their premises, then it just means that Eskom is going to need to produce less, and it means more electricity for the rest of the people. I'm not very confident that this AfriForum proposal is going to go very far. I don't really know what they're talking about. You can't set up another Eskom just like that. So at best, I think they're probably talking about what's effectively a fairly small energy operation, of which there are quite a few other ones already in existence in the country.
Prof, I don't know if you can help me with this one. I mean, we mentioned earlier in our previous stories about even President Cyril Ramaphosa admitting that, the problems at Eskom date back years, since 1998 roundabout. And of course, we know the other problems that they are facing are because of ailing infrastructure. We've mentioned some of these right in this interview. And then, of course, there's that issue of, sabotage within Eskom itself. But another thing that has been, mentioned around why we are still sitting with the problems that we're still sitting with is because of political interference. And now the DA is obviously calling for Minister of Resources and Energy, Minister Gwede Mantashe, and Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, to basically to step aside and allow the work from experts within Eskom to do their job. I wonder how much of that lack of interference will help us. You talked about a better scenario, hopefully next year, this time. I wonder how much of that will help.
Yes, well, I think politicians all around have not been very helpful right throughout this crisis. Minister Mantashe certainly shouldn't have said a lot of what amounts to a complete vote of confidence and calling Eskom, accusing them of wanting to overthrow the state. And that really shouldn't come from a minister who's, after all, Eskom ultimately is part of. So at the same time, I don't think other political parties should see this as an opportunity of point scoring and getting a few extra votes for the election. I think this is a time for people to show some sort of a greater leadership for the broader good. And yes, you might get, there shouldn't be too much interference in that, but ultimately I think we're at the point now where bringing in a whole lot of experts is not going to have the sort of effect that you might imagine. There's nobody that's going to come in that's suddenly going to turn Eskom around, even though there's lots of people who claim that they have the ability to do so. Whether that's some internal people with a magic formula or whether it's some top engineers from overseas, nobody's going to be able to make a really meaningful change to Eskom right now. I can maybe use the analogy of the Bafana Bafana national team. You're not going to turn the world champions overnight by bringing in whoever you think is the best coach in the world. It's just not going to happen. So right now, I think what we're looking for is cool heads. We're looking for plans, implementable, workable plans, and we're looking, I think, for people to try and work together to appreciate the scale of the problem and to work together to solve things.
Prof, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it this afternoon. Professor Hartmut Winkler, he's an energy expert there, saying that we need cool heads and we need implementable plans immediately to sort out the energy crisis that we are currently experiencing as a country.